Namaste and in Lexiss, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and as always, I'm going to refresh your memory on what Namaste and in Lexiss actually mean. Namaste comes from the Brahmi, spoken, written, it's Sanskrit. It means the divine in me recognizes the divine in you. In Lexiss comes from the Mayan civilization on the other side of the world, and it means I am another you. So think about those two items from ancient times and their relevance today as you meet each other, meet others on the street, in the store, your loved ones, whatever. Imagine the impact that holding that idea, that concept, that notion within you could make. Test it, find out. Don't believe the thing I say. Right? All right, well, this week's guest is Dr. Lexis Johnson. She has a doctorate and PhD in psychology, easy for me to say. She's an international best-selling author. She's a wellness TV host. She runs Essential Academy, which does astrology, alchemy, success processes of which she's an instructor of, and she's double board certified in holistic health and nutritional consulting. So she says she helps bring brick and mortar holistic wellness professionals to create multiple streams of income to serve their clients and patients more while providing themselves a lockdown resistant business. Lexis, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Oh, thank you very much. I just want to correct you one thing. I don't run Essential Academy. My good friend Natan Bukovsky does. I'm just one of the faculty members, but thank you very much.
Well, you're welcome. And thanks for the correction. We always want to have correct information.
I just wanted to be clear.
Cool. Clarity and communication is primal today. We've got to have it. So speaking of clarity, you probably started finding clarity within yourself and establishing that relationship with your inner awareness fairly young, I would imagine. What was that like, and how did that come about, and how might others, kind of connect with their own?
Well, thank you very much for having me today. I appreciate it. And that's a very good question. I was fortunate enough to be born with the most amazing family members. My mother was very, very spiritual, very psychic, and often people would just come to her out of the blue and start telling my mother her story and what was going on in their lives, and my mother would have an answer for them. And I've inherited that skill. And then on my father's side, my grandfather, who lived in California and I lived in Canada, we would visit him every summer. And my grandfather was an amazing man who believed in astrology and all kinds of other things that were very spiritual, meditation. He lived to be a very old man in his 90s and meditated every single day. Even had a girlfriend that lived next door, and he had several girlfriends that I considered to be my grandmothers, and outlived all of them. He had a very solid belief in moderation, which he taught me, although I don't know that I'm all that moderate. But he taught me meditation skills, and he started teaching me about astrology. And so that was my humble beginnings.
That's awesome. And you mentioned the elderly. One of my previous guests was also working with elders and elder wisdom. And one of the things that it reminded me of as well is there was a gentleman here in town, this has been 30 years ago. He was 92 at the time, and he was the ex-president of Valley National Bank. And there was an article about him in our local alternative newspaper. And he simply said, hey, I'm just here to talk to people. Still had his office in the top of the bank building. So I figured, okay, I'm going to call him up and make an appointment, go talk to him. Well, the reason I did is I'd just written a project plan for an international cultural center that I wanted to run past him to see if it was solid. And so I went in, talked to him, and we sat down, we talked about the plan for a while. And he said, that sounds great. You just need to go out and find the pieces. And then we spent better part of an hour talking about his wife and how she used her tarot reading, astrological charts, and so on for him in developing the business. And he and his brother brought over 70% of the business into the Phoenix area during that period. So he was tremendously successful with that and using those tools. So why don't we use those today if we've got those kinds of people who
Exactly.
are applying that, right?
Exactly.
So as you grew then, how, and having that kind of background and family and nurturing in the, I'll just call it esoteric arts for lack of a better, that had to have been just really precious. And for me, I'm a bit envious because I had all kinds of stuff going on as a kid and nobody to talk to. Of course, I was adopted, and maybe that was that was my path because I just had to be on it by myself for some time, and just so I could learn and learn how to trust it. So in that process, and speaking of trust, how did you learn what was internal and reflective of the outer world in the trust building process of that inner relationship?
Wow, that's a mouthful of a question. Just to step back a little bit.
Sure.
You did mention your fellow in the bank. I just wanted to say that one of my very good friends and one of my very first astrology teachers, who's now crossed over, was an incredible man who how he made his money with astrology was he would help people invest in stocks, and he would have stock traders that would put cash in an envelope and mail it to him because he wanted to fly under the radar.
Right.
Not sure what all that was about, but he would absolutely give them information that blew them out of the water. And this was the man that was teaching me. And how I met him was I was having a baby, and it was my second baby, but my first natural birth, because the first one was a cesarean, and I was desperate to have a natural childbirth. And we had a boy and we wanted a girl. So now I've got 7 kids, so it really didn't matter because I ended up with some of each. But at the time it was very important that we have this, what we wanted. Sure. And I really wanted more children. So I was very concerned that I didn't want another cesarean, because back in those days, it was once a cesarean, always a cesarean. And I was kind of ahead of the curve, not wanting that. He was doing astrological readings for all the women in the group. And it was a group that would bring the husbands, and we'd all practice the breathing like Lamaze, but it wasn't Lamaze, but very similar. He did a birth chart for every one of us. And he did a chart and told me that he told me when I would have this baby, that it would be a girl, which she was, and that it would be natural childbirth. And he said it would be very fast and not to worry about it, just to believe, and that'd be fine. And sure enough, and he said there would be some sadness around when she was born, but not to worry, it wouldn't have anything to do with her. And true to his word, I delivered right when he said I would. She was a girl, and we had gone to the doctor's office that afternoon. My husband came with me, which he never came, and I couldn't understand why, but there's a reason. And when we got there, the doctor said, well, I have no idea when she's going to deliver. It could be any time, could be another week. We don't know. So my husband had a secret to tell me, and he didn't want to tell me if it was bad news, and he didn't want to tell me if I was going to have the baby. So he was hemming and hawing and didn't want to say anything. Doctor's office is 45 minutes away. So on the way home, I went into labor. That's a 45-minute drive. We got all the way home. I had a shower. We got my older son to the next door neighbors, and we headed all the way back. And the doctor didn't make it, and he was only 10 minutes away from the hospital. We started delivering the baby's head before the doctor came in. And it wasn't until the next morning that my husband then came in and told me that my father had passed away. And it was very important to me because my father was a Libra, and my daughter was born the 1st degree of Libra. My dad wanted her to be a Libra, and we thought we were overdue. We didn't think she'd be as far into September 23rd. Right. We thought she'd be born even in August. And that he knew that we just knew that my dad knew. And of course, my husband didn't want to tell me this before because I'd be upset.
It kind of dampened your mood for sure.
And that was how I became very good friends with my friend, who was my very first real teacher for astrology, and stayed my friend right till the day he died. So, and now back to your question. I'm not quite even sure what your question was anymore. I kind of went off on a tangent.
Well, the question was basically, how did you develop your inner trust with
Yes.
your awareness and what was going on around you when that process took place?
I think I was actually, I think I was very, very blessed. I was born with a hearing problem, and nobody realized that I had a hearing problem. We just thought I was a very quiet child. And if you know me today and you knew me then, you wouldn't think I was the same person, because now I'm quite talkative and very sociable and outgoing. And back then I wasn't. I think I'm one of those extroverted introverts. And back then I was an introverted introvert. I was blessed to have the most amazing mother who did spend quite a bit of time with me, educating me, taught me to read before I went to school, and got me into dance lessons and all kinds of things where I could express myself. And I had such a great trust with her. But I think it's my innate nature. If you look at my astrological chart, I have a lot of trust in me. The trust that I have today is now developed because I have had things happen in my life where you trust someone and it doesn't work out. For example, I'm divorced. I've had things happen in my life that you just, you think you can trust someone.
Well, sometimes, there's a time and a season for relationships.
Exactly. So
there's nothing you can do about that.
I think I've had to develop it, and it's a learning curve for one thing. And it is not the easiest thing to do because you have to trust before you really do trust. It's a lot like the ascension process where you have to believe you've already got what you're trying to manifest in life, right? So it's a lot like that. You have to have the trust in order to develop the trust. And that's a very difficult thing to do. So I'm glad though that this all happened in my life, because it makes me a better coach and a better friend and a better partner, because I've been there and now I'm here. So I've seen both sides of it. So yes, I'm very glad to be who I am.
Yeah, that's great. And yes, you're right. It is a tough process. My wife and I, she's from St. Petersburg, and both of us have had very intimate engagements, I guess, with our inner worlds, and they've been active. And yet there's times where that listening, the voice occurs, or the impression or the visual or whatever, however it shows up, and the attention isn't paid, and then there's some consequences because of that. And so we have conversations about, really being still and listening, and then behaving in such a way that complements that prompting, instruction, guidance, it can be called many things because it provides all kinds of different information depending on the situations. And it could be short-term, could be long-term, could be in the moment. It's just being able to have that kind of awareness where there are multiple aspects of yourself that are actually participating in the listening and paying attention. Now, what was that like for you? Because you understood everything that I said, because I know you lived that. Could you reflect on how that works for you, and maybe how you've been able to take that and help others apply it as well?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. You ask the hard questions, and I'm glad you do, because these answers need to be brought out to the public, especially at the times that we're going through right now. We have so many people waking up, pivoting, changing jobs from where they were. Things have happened with lockdowns. It is a very important time in history right now. And that you ask these questions right now and ask them in the depth that you're asking them is very, very key to the times that we're living in. And how I developed it was because, like, as you said, with the trust, you don't have it. And with the little inner voice, I call it a guidance, like a GPS system, that it tells you when, like when trouble's coming down the road, or when you need to be cautious, when you need to look out. And the same feelings inside of you of nervousness are the same feelings for anxiety, like you're excited and you're happy about something good that's coming, those feel like the same feelings about when you're nervous and anxious about something else that's coming down the road. They're very similar feelings. It's like
Absolutely. And I love that you make that distinction. When I work with clients, that same sensation can either, there's two sides of it to it, right?
Yeah.
There's the fear, and then there's the
excitement.
Well, it's more than excitement. It's the inspiration, the anticipation, the awakening that's happening. There's another word that'll come here in a minute. It's avoiding me right now because I'm searching for it, right? But those kinds of things that, when you realize that there's the prompting of something cool going to happen, it's going to feel the same as the anxiety. It's how you choose to interpret it.
Exactly.
And then create that reality.
Exactly. And that's exactly what you're doing, is creating the reality. If you step into the fear of it, I like to tell people that fear is a big, black, dark curtain or wall that's in front of them. But what they don't realize, I mean, it goes up as high as they can see and out to every side as far as they can see and all the way down to the bottom of the horizon. And yet, if they just take their little pinky finger and touch it with their fingernail, it disintegrates completely, just melts away, because the only power that fear has is that you believe it has a problem for you.
Right. It's the power we give it.
It's the power that we give it. And so when you want to manifest, and this is what I teach, manifestation is basically what I teach. When you want something in your life and you have these feelings, of course you're going to have them because it's the unknown. Mm-hmm. And so you're going to be anxious or nervous or fearful about what you've never done before. But you need to take steps towards it. And you need to take those steps in the knowing of the unknowing. It's something you've never done before. Mm-hmm. And you just have to have that trust, which we talked about a few minutes ago.
Ideally, that's what we need to do. And yet
we don't do it.
That's the ultimate challenge. Well, because we don't have an extended experience of it. These moments are definitely non-linear, mm-hmm. right? And sometimes they're even non-local, mm-hmm. right? Because we have multiple dimensions that we're operating on, whether we're aware of it or not. Quantum physics, there's even a model now called the triadic dimensional distinction vortical paradigm that states that consciousness, space, and time are tethered across 9 dimensions for the human experience. So these are things that even science now is finding out. Now, how we operate on those dimensions is still kind of nebulous, and yet there are processes for that too. But they've been, they're 60 years prior to this, the triadic dimensional distinction vortical paradigm being published. There was a guy named William Swigart back in the 1950s who wrote came to put together a process called the multi-plane awareness technique. Mm-hmm. That takes people through 9 dimensions and mm-hmm. integrates their bodies on each one of them. Now, back in the 50s, that was
far out there.
It was far out. It was probably incredulous to most people, and yet thousands of people have experienced it and report that it works. Mm-hmm. Now, what we do with that, is still, it's a learning process.
Yeah.
So are there those types of things that have happened with you and or your clients that you were able to help bring clarity to and application in the world for?
Absolutely. And just to go back to your comment there, I forget who the famous person was, but there is a comment that science is indistinguishable from magic until it becomes mainstream. And I'm totally paraphrasing, and I can't remember who said it, but that's the thought that comes to mind. But yeah, I have thousands of testimonials. I've been doing astrology since I was a teenager, and I'm older than I look. I've been doing astrology for 5 decades, more than, and I've got all these other healing modalities because I can't stop learning. I'll be.
Well, something's been working, right? Something's been working because you do appear younger than you are, right? And you feel that way. That's evident.
I do. And what I wanted when I was younger was to learn. I had food allergies. Was allergic to cats and I loved kittens. My parents wouldn't let me have a dog. So I always wanted a cat and I always had a cat. And they always thought, oh, she's got the flu again. Now she's got a cold. And they didn't realize these were allergies. So I grew up with a lot of these health problems. And when you don't take care of your problems, they get worse. So I had everything under the sun. And by the time I was having babies, I had so many things going on that I needed to study something. And because I was always pregnant, the doctors couldn't do much to help me. So, and that's another blessing. I researched and found out that I had food sensitivities, and that got me into nutrition. And so my education was because I wanted these things for myself. And I learned modalities that were all physical. Something about sound therapy for hearing, because I wear hearing aids. So it was important to me that I could hear properly and that there was other dimensions out there. I wanted to make sure I could hear what other people were hearing. And then,
well, having a hearing loss doesn't necessarily prohibit you. It maybe even open you up to hearing other things, because your bandwidth is different.
Exactly. And so I have all these modalities for the five senses. Healing and taste was nutrition, and touch was kinesthetic reflexology, and color therapy for sight. I mean, aromatherapy for the smells, the sense of things. And then I got into, well, how does that relate to astrology? I mean, I've got a tug of war between the physical world and the metaphysical world. So I started learning more and more about the metaphysical world and quantum physics and quantum mechanics, and I loved it. And I wanted all these other modalities, and I have those as well. And you're right, my sense of hearing is not that great for the public. I do much better one-on-one than I do in big groups, because I just can't hear everybody at once. Sure. If somebody hollers at me, I'm like, which direction did that come from? Because I just can't hear it. But when I do my astrology readings, something comes over me and I start doing psychic readings with claircognizance. I just get a download of information. And it's like, I just hear the information inside of me. I just know the answer. So it's clairaudience and claircognizance is what that's called. I just know.
I refer to the clairals.
The clairals, that's a good one. I like that.
And only your hairdresser knows for sure.
Yeah.
Right? That's a way back machine.
Talk with my hairdresser.
Right. Well, in these, and granted, these are strange, odd, weird kind of things that people that aren't familiar with it, especially now coming out of the pandemic, having gone inside and began seeking who they are and what they stand for and asking the pertinent questions of that nature, then those things begin to come to them because they finally asked for them.
Exactly.
So it shows up all kinds of different ways.
Yes.
How would you suggest that in that process, that people become more comfortable with it, or at least receptive to it, or even be able to experience and test to refine it?
Well, I was fortunate. I was very lucky to have my mother and my grandfather bring this colorful history, this colorful information into my life. But the point is, it's not well known. We don't have what we used to have. Many centuries ago, we were in tribes of people, and the elders taught the younger ones how to exist in the world. And the indigenous cultures, which is what I studied in university, the indigenous cultures are still doing that, and they're smaller in numbers.
Right. And they start with the first brain, which is the gut. That's the intuition, exactly. Right? We call it intuition or gut feeling or something like that. Well, that's that kind of knowledge and working with is as ancient as these indigenous cultures, because they've had it from the beginning. Now because especially in the United States, I don't know about Canada, but in the United States, we're this amalgamation of multiple cultures, which makes our culture really like, infant in its ability to integrate and learn from each other in order to bring that knowledge that is applicable ubiquitously to the forefront. And so that's kind of what my hopes are with these kind of conversations, is that, once the conversation begins and we start exploring these kinds of things, that information is available and the curiosity can take over to explore further.
Yes, and we have something going on. When human beings don't advance in the direction of our ascension, when we aren't going in the direction, something happens. There's a war or something happens. And right now we've had a pandemic, we've had the global reset, and we've had a lot of dark forces. And why that's happening is to wake people up, and people are waking up, and they're having to do this word that I hate, but it's a word that's very popular, which is pivot and do something different. And when people are being told to do something different, there's fear. So there's fear at lockdowns. There was fear of being alone, fear of not having people to hug, fear of all these different things that we've been going through, and then fear of how am I going to make a living? I can't do it the way I
fear of each other. That's why we were sequestered.
Fear of the germs, fear of the government, fear of so many things.
I have a great friend, that Swami Byandananda. You may have heard of him as a New Age comic. He's been doing it for 35 years or so. And he refers to this process as the Great Uprising and the Great Reset.
And reset.
Right?
Hey,
because
like
we've
that.
separated, now we're coming back together and we're starting to ask the right questions.
Exactly.
To grow together instead of separately.
Yeah. And that's what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be walking into the unknown. And if we were fortunate enough to have elders in our family society, of our little hierarchy, to teach us these things from the top down in our family, then we don't have as much fear. And I think that's what's held me in good stead. And not being able to hear has also cloistered me, because I can hear, I just miss a lot. And I don't watch TV, and I don't listen to the radio, and I don't look for problems when I go online. Right. If I need to know this information, someone's going to tell me, right? And so I do get to find things out, and it's painful. And
now that's another thing, okay? And I want to point this out, that the more you focus on what's right in front of you to do with your own attention, intention, and interaction, what you need to find will be given to your, or if there's information that you need, it'll come from someplace. Because all of the rest of this is just distraction.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that's why the dark forces have had all this intention, because we've got the internet and it's been controlled, and the media have been
I take issue with dark forces, because nothing is good or bad.
Well, whatever you want to call them. I don't want to call them out. I don't want to call them out and say them, because I don't want to. I believe in speaking the world that we live in, right? And for me, my life's pretty darn good, and I want to keep it pretty darn good. So I believe that the good outnumber the negative, and that
I will agree. I will agree with that. I wouldn't necessarily call them dark forces. I would call them uninformed and perhaps ignorant, because in my exploration of the realms that I've been able to explore, there are no dark forces. The only dark force is when you turn away from it and operate on a selfish or self-serving, or in a self-serving manner. And that may be what you're calling the dark forces.
I don't know what else to call them, because they're people who want to control other people. And I don't agree with that. I believe in free will and free choice. And
absolutely, non-aggression, free will. This is what live and let live is all about, right?
Exactly. And peace, the peace for the world. War needs to happen. Opposites need to happen. We need contrast in order to appreciate things, right? We need the contrast in order to grow.
It's the choice of contrast.
Exactly.
Right? Because we don't, there is a time when, right now, for instance, the budgets that are spent on war machinery could feed the world 10 times over if applied to that. So
there's no reason for people to be hungry. There's no reason for people to be homeless, or for people to be like killing each other and bombing each other. And it's like, I got my hand stuck in the cookie jar kind of thing. If I can't have what I want, you can't have it either. So bang. right? Where did this come from? You
Right.
know, and we have to get back to helping each other, because the reasons that we're in what the mess that we're in is a lot because of being in a lockdown situation
Right.
where we couldn't nurture each other the way we would like to, the way that's natural for humans to do it. Even in the animal kingdom, mammals, other higher elevated animals do this too, but mostly mammals nurture each other. They grow in packs. They have what they do in a society that's of their own, whatever type of animal they are.
Until they believe that there is scarcity.
Until they believe there's scarcity. Exactly.
And so this fear of lack is what I think is that causes people to hoard.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But
This is a human characteristic that is misplaced or misguided. It's not necessarily a dark force. It's just an ignorance of what is available and operating from a place of fear rather than a place of love.
For the mainstream people, yes. However, I believe that this lack in our society currently has been created. It is a.
I'm not in disagreement with that,
right,
because of those controlling factors. As civilizations grow, and Howard Bloom brought this out in his book called The Lucifer Principle, and that was that throughout history, small groups of people have manipulated massive numbers, entire populations in some cases, based on lies that are told over and over again by controlling whatever media stream is available, whether it's a town crier or the internet, until that actually is believed by the public, because that's all they're hearing. There's nothing else for them to
So
consider.
what we need, and what I am, is a woman's empowerment coach. What we need are more leaders. And I believe when the Dalai Lama said Western woman would save the world, he didn't mean one woman. He didn't
Right.
mean a Western woman. What he meant was a woman of the internet, a woman of the modern ways.
Well, the divine feminine, this is the nurturing. This is the emotional side of things that men have been avoiding like the plague. We're taught, well, you can't show your emotions. You got to be stalwart. You got to be stoic.
Yep.
You can't let anything
balance
show.
We don't need men who are fighting to hide and suppress their feminine side. Well, and we don't need women to overlord it over men and have a matriarchal society. What we need is balance.
Exactly.
We need a balance of both. We need, the world would be a horrible place if everybody was the same. We need lots of differences. We need both types, but
one of the things I got the opportunity to do with organizational development currently, because that's kind of my background, is that with Live and Let Live peace movement that we've talked about before, basically that live and let live is the principle. Live meaning you don't aggress. Let live meaning be a good human, right? So when you have those two things in tandem, life is great. Peace exists. Well, my cohort who's in Hawaii, we're operating together, and she and I together have this amazing skill set that's complementary, and it's almost like we don't have to ask each other what to do. We just do it, and then we come back and confer and say, oh yeah, this is really working. Now, when you consider having to put together the structure and the infrastructure and the project planning aspects of things and dealing with a global movement that already has 30 chapters in 19 countries when we arrived. So now there's this, okay, how do we herd cats?
Sounds like a good partnership, though.
And it's not that difficult. However, it takes some time.
You need strong leaders.
And leadership. Well, it's fun for us. And because we've got the skill set and the expertise, and there's no stress for us to do so. And we have the clarity of communication that's necessary to implement things. And we share that divine masculine feminine energy, and it ebbs and flows through both of us.
There you go. And people learn best when they're having fun, when they enjoy the subject matter, and when
if you're not having fun, you're doing the wrong thing.
Exactly.
Right? There's got to be some fun. Now, that's not to say that some of the stuff is going to be arduous or mundane or monotonous, or even you don't like it, but it's still part of what needs to be done when you have the comparison of the overall project or overall activity. And there's this little sliver that oh, I don't like that, right? Or I don't want to do that. Well, get over yourself. That's
Yeah,
part of
you got
what needs to be
90,
done.
90% over here that you love, and now a little bit of 10% over here comes in that you don't like, and you're going to just, I'm not doing that. Like, come
Right?
on.
Exactly.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
It's all part of a process. And that is and the process is both learning how to be, first of all, and then how and what to do from that place of being. Because if you're not in the place of being, which is that centered
Mhm.
source available, if you will, listening, perception,
Yeah. But if you
open
get
to
the being
intuition.
part right, then the doing part falls into place because the person that you be wants the action to take to go towards the thing that needs to get done.
Absolutely. Now,
And the being
speaking of
part.
that, can you share an example of a real world example of how that worked for you?
What worked for me? Being into action?
Yeah,
Oh.
being first, having a goal,
Mhm.
right? And then allowing yourself to be whatever was necessary to accomplish that goal, and then the doing of the steps.
I can think of lots of examples. For one thing, I've got 7 children. In
Yeah,
order to raise children, it's a good idea to show them by example. So a good parent, I'm not saying I'm a good or bad parent, but a good parent will exemplify the type of responsibility, the type of person that they want their children to become, getting higher education, being nice to other people, saving money, spending money, how to budget, all the things that aren't taught in schools. It's left up to the parents. And the problem that we have today is that both parents, for the most part, are now out in the workforce, and children are being raised by nannies, by daycares, by other people.
mm-hmm.
So
And it
you don't
stifles the
know what's in school
curiosity and the
anymore.
learning of the kids too. I've taught high school, and I taught both regular ed and special ed. And when you find a place of curiosity, it doesn't matter what your aptitude or attitude is, or your intelligence level. When you can tap into that curiosity and nurture it,
Yes.
then that's gold. Now, I found in most parental situations, if there's a child that's highly sensitive and experiencing things, they are not acknowledged for that. They're not explored. The curiosity from the parental side. Okay, sweetheart, what's going on with you? And can you, because they don't know how to articulate it, right? They're
Well,
having
first
just
of
as
all,
much problems with articulation as they are, with the experience itself.
we don't get the children we want necessarily. We often get the children we need. Children teach us a tremendous amount.
Absolutely.
And having learned about astrology, I understand that everybody's born with talents and goals and wishes and desires. And when you have children that, let's say you're a doctor or a lawyer, or you wish you were, and then you have children, you want them to make you proud, because we all want to be proud of our kids. We then try to push on them our beliefs. But if you get a very artistic child who's into creativity and pottery and molding something, or they're a physical person, they like building or fixing cars or working on machines, or out in the garden, you need to love them and encourage them for the talents that they already have, because that's what they came into this world for. And when I do astrology readings, one of the most important questions, the most important question I get asked is, what am I supposed to be in the world? What's my sole purpose? And your sole purpose is all of those talents that you came in with, and you have them. You have lots of them.
It's like finding your
Sometimes you've
perfected
forgotten
form,
them.
fit, and function in the world.
Exactly, like an architect.
Yeah.
Flawless function, exactly.
Now, do you find in your experience that kids with abilities are often, especially young gifts, the sensitivities, they're often misunderstood and even taken to the wrong places and diagnosed with things that have nothing to do with really what's going on with them.
Yep.
And then the pharmacology begins.
Yep. And that's very sad, because we don't just have one kind of people in the world. right? We have kinesthetic learners, we have visual learners, we have auditory learners. We need to encourage our people, our young people,
And you haven't
in the
even
way
mentioned the
they are
multiple
already
intelligences.
talented.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and schools try to well, for the most part, schools try to pigeonhole them into one way of teaching because they have 30 kids in a classroom or more, and
I
one
had 50
teacher.
in one.
And how do you take
And
care of the
what a
needs of
madhouse.
each other? There's nothing wrong with an autistic child or a child with Asperger's. These are just names that are given to people who think differently. They're
You don't
incredibly
understand them.
intelligent people,
Right.
right?
Yeah. And the intelligence level, even emotional intelligence level
Yes.
of the kids with Asperger's or the autism are off the chart.
Yes.
They just don't know how to cope, and so they shut down.
Yeah, that's
Because
true.
there's nobody there actually trying to, it's like this, what is number 5 in the 7 habits, right? Seek first to understand before you're understood.
Yeah, well, I was one of those kids. When I went to school, I already knew how to read.
I was too.
We moved in the year that I should have started kindergarten, and my mother didn't know any better. She just didn't want me to fall behind everybody else. So she taught me how to read, and she went a little too far because we did reading and we did printing and we started into cursive. I got into school and I was bored. Now, I was a compliant child, so all I did was complain, have tummy aches, and the teacher would say, if you're not feeling good, just put your head on the desk. I was not happy in school. I hated school until they changed me to a different classroom where other kids were at the same level that I was at. Now, I wasn't at that level with math or any of these other skills, but I was there with the the culture of reading and
Reading and writing.
Once you could
had the reading and writing, but not the arithmetic.
Exactly. But once you could read and you had books, you could learn anything.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? So I was bored.
And you can go anywhere.
I didn't get along with any of the kids in school because I couldn't identify with any of them, and I couldn't hear half of them, and I couldn't hear them in groups. So
Right.
I was a very shy kid. So yeah, I had problems. It wasn't until I got out of school, which I quit school when I was 16. I got my education as an adult after I had children on my own. And that's very hard because we didn't have computers we had computers, but we didn't have online learning. I had to get like homeschooling. I had to go to the schools and ask the schools, would you please bring in these science labs so I, could use their facilities? Where was I supposed to get all these things I was supposed to be learning? It wasn't easy. And I was raising 7 kids and getting divorced at the same time. It was not easy. It was hard. So I'm a very good coach.
But you did it.
Because I've been through so many of the things that they're going through, and I had to do it with 7 kids. And I chose to do it, and I loved doing it. But I was always tired. I have to admit, I was always tired.
Well, raising 7 kids and doing those things that you needed to do. Yeah, there was I'm sure, I know, but I had 4 kids, and at least as long as I was married, I wasn't able to raise them to full maturity, and I really missed that. That's one of my greatest regrets in life. However, that is such a rewarding, fulfilling activity that it's all worth it once you put up, it's like we were talking about earlier, that you have all these things available and you love to do, and there's this little bit that that makes you cranky. Well, you still need to get it done, and you persevere, and you get through it. And today I find that there's an extreme amount of apathy toward simply doing what needs to be done.
Yes, because of the way children are being raised today. They're being raised that everybody gets a trophy if they're on the team. They're not raised that it's okay to feel not so good if you didn't do very well, right? Baseball is not my talent. I didn't get a trophy for playing baseball, but if I was going to be in the group with the age group my kids were, I'd get a trophy. How does that make me a better person? Right? It doesn't teach them. And the other thing is, when our parents were young, they were told, if it's on the table, you eat it. There's no second helping. There's no second choices of dinner. I'm not a short order cook. If there's work to be done, you're pitching in, you're doing it. And today's kids are like, no, I'll do it later. Or no, I don't feel like it. I'm not doing that.
And they sit and play video games
And they play
instead.
video games. So they're getting very good at hand-eye coordination. So if you want a job where you're flying a drone and it's going out somewhere else and you're just going to sit in your truck and take care of it, you're going to be very well adapted for that.
Right.
Or
Now,
working
there
from
are
home
some other
where-
things. One of my other guests, very interesting gentleman who had 17-year-old, and I'm also raising another 17-year-old. And we were talking about the obsession with playing the games, and he had a real issue with it. And instead of coming down on his son, he went in and sat and watched and just observed for a while. And he saw the skills that his son was exhibiting of all kinds of different workplace activities, management, delegation, team organization, communication, working together to
and critical
reach a goal. And so, he had to sit back and go, now, wait a minute. Although I don't like this activity and I think it takes away from other things, there's still some benefit to it. And yet there's still that amount of time that's spent doing it that could probably be adjusted a little bit in order to get them, physically active.
Yeah, but that's a good lesson for teachers and for teaching venues, because gamification is where that word came from. They're playing games because they get rewarded. They get a level, they get the mushroom, they get the token, they get the gold, whatever it is they're after, right? If we could make our educational systems more reward based, and they have to accomplish it. They don't just get a trophy for being part of the team. They actually have to do something. They have to move up to the next level. That would guarantee people moving up to the next level in their learning.
It's interesting. I was on the board of directors for at that point, it was called the American Society for Training and Development. It's now called the Association for Talent Development. Global organization, 149 countries. They're all corporate instructional designers, trainers, chief information officers, and those types. Well, all of this has been included in their e-learning and presentations now, the gamification aspect of it, all kinds of things. And I'm watching all this, it's like, my God, how, it's just amazing at what they're doing and how effective it actually is when it's applied correctly. And it's just using the technology that we have and redirecting that focus into.
It's all good. We need a balance.
You're right.
Yeah, it's all good. No.
Anything that comes forth, there's the abuse and there's the use. And until we find the balance in that, and that could take a few years, could take decades. We found that we started with the industrial age and the combustible engine and using fossil fuels. We never thought that it would eventually impact our health or the globe and how it affects the planet.
Well, doctors used to recommend tobacco smoke that it was good for your health.
Yeah.
Right? Now today, not so much anymore. We know better.
It does. Pure tobacco does help with digestion.
It's actually,
but not the store-bought kind, because those have
and essential oils of tobacco is good for you too. Yeah. But things happen, right? Commercialization in order to make to compete with others, and that's the problem. I believe in collaboration, not competition. Competition is for personal best as far as I'm concerned, but in any event, because of competition, one brand wants to one up the other and get more sales or more piece of the pie of what's being sold out there.
Market share.
So what they do is they put something in their tobacco to make it either more addictive or something. They're putting other things in until at this point in time, we've got like over 300 different chemicals. I don't know what the count is up to now, to the point that they want cigarettes to continue to be addictive. Now, I'm an aromatherapist. As an aromatherapist, there is something that we can do to help with people who are trying to quit. And one of those, and I'll tell you, is essential oil of nutmeg. Some cigarette companies have actually put oil of nutmeg in their cigarettes to make us sensitized to them so that we'll continue to be addicted. How can you fight that, right? How do you fight that? Chemicals have a faster working in the body because they're built stronger. The natural substances are more subtle. They take a little longer to work. So we have to use a lot of this, a lot of mindset.
Absolutely. So in this, let's go back into the how to tune in and find those kinds of things, ask the right questions. What's a good process that you use in order to explore the unknown or information that you need?
For myself, or when I'm working with a client?
Yeah, for yourself, because I'm sure you teach the same thing to your clients, right?
Well, when I'm working with a client, I create assessment tools. So I create quizzes that help me find out what it is I need to know about them so I can help them, but gives them tremendous value because it helps them understand on a different level.
Right.
But for myself, I just was very fortunate to have the education that I have. I'm a good researcher. So, I look things up, and I love the internet because now my library is right here in front of me. It's like wherever my phone is, I've got my library right there.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm constantly researching things. But I was fortunate to have a parent who taught me to be curious. And nowadays, parents will lay their kid down and put a mobile over his head and expect him to be happy looking at the same little 5 things going in a circle.
Because they've just worked a long day, they come home, they're tired,
Okay.
they just
Or
want to
they prop
relax.
it in front of the television.
Yeah.
And that doesn't promote curiosity. It makes them very one-sided because they will like the thing that gives them the adrenaline boost,
It's
right? So
passive
we have a very
programming.
anxious society who is hooked on drama, hooked on that adventure, hooked on the adrenaline, and doesn't appreciate getting inside of themselves, doesn't appreciate the stillness. And if you don't have the stillness, you can't get into the higher consciousness, which is where all these fabulous, amazing ideas come from. The Teslas and the Einsteins, that's where they got their ideas from.
Well, the old adage, in the silence is the voice of being.
Yes.
And we've heard that for a long time. It's the ability to turn the monkey mind off and actually be able to listen. Mm-hmm. and have the perseverance to be quiet for some period of time. Right?
Well, actually, there is a reason for the monkey mind. The monkey mind is a bunch of problems that's going through your stream of consciousness that needs to be dealt with. And it's okay. When you try to meditate and you can't shut off those, it's okay to say to every one of those thoughts, okay, I hear you. I'm going to put you aside and deal with you later, or deal with it.
Yeah, because you find them, they'll just be, that's what you don't want to do. You want to get to the place where you can just watch them and be okay with it. And gradually they dissipate.
And don't interact with them. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's how you get beyond that to get to your higher consciousness so that you can get to the stillness. Right?
Absolutely. And like I said, in that silence is the voice of being. Again, this is an odd, weird place for probably 99% of the population, maybe less than that now because of what's been taking place and the ability to acquiesce to that, because that's really what happens is you don't necessarily give up your will, you give it to something that's more beneficial to you in the listening. You don't give it to the problem solving, because you're right. We, by our nature, this is one thing, and I learned this in college after my own awakening. I got the urge to go down and look up the word Satan in the university dictionary, right? So I go down to the library and they've got these 2 massive volumes of in the dictionaries. And so I'm flipping through it and then I go to Satan. The very first reference says it comes from the Greek, Thetan, Thetan, and it means thinker. So if you were to take something really close to the meaning and then totally misconstrue it and make it into some kind of devilish figure, because you're always thinking about stuff and you're always going, vacillating between the fear and the love and or the 2 wolves, which one are you going to feed?
Yeah, exactly. I love that. Right? I love that story.
Yeah. So thank you. It's very pertinent. In that process, what do you do? How do you handle, or how did you handle working through that?
I didn't at first. And I think the Satan thinker is the overthinker, not just the thinker, but the overthinker, the overanalyzer. And that is me. And it's still me today. And I'm constant because it's part of my nature. So I have to constantly keep working on that part of me and trusting and having faith. But as a manifester, I know I have faith, and I've seen it work so many times in my own life. And now I can help other people manifest. I can manifest for other people by what my beliefs are and not overanalyzing all the what ifs, the shoulds, the coulds, the wouldas, the what ifs. Those are not good words. If there's a Satan, those are his words, right? If there's that. I've never believed there was an actual person, like
me neither.
But I do think that we personify that in our lives, and that part of overanalyzing is definitely part of that.
Right.
Don't you think?
And we're thinkers instead of listeners.
Yes. Yes.
That's the flip side of it.
But sometimes we shouldn't be listening either. Sometimes it's a matter of what's the right thing for myself. The people who have invented new things and new ways and come up with different concepts have not listened to other people.
That's not what I was talking about.
Exactly.
I was talking about listening to the inner, right?
Okay.
The thinking is in the inner.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
That's the unfettered mind or mental activity. But when you shut that off, then you become a listener. Right? And the questions that are still there, those are embedded. Those are deeply embedded and innate to all of us. We just don't allow ourselves to get to that place because we're involved in the thinking and the doing, as opposed to the curiosity and the listening.
Well, you know what they say, we're human beings, not human doings.
Exactly. I mean, it's right in front of us.
From the moment we get up, we're do. And
we're just a bunch of do,
right? Exactly.
Do with a hoodoo and a voodoo.
Be right? More than do.
Yeah. And it's such an enjoyable activity when you're able to move beyond your own thinking and entertain the possibilities that you can coagulate, and which means basically pulling out of the ethers and manifesting, because it is a process of precipitation, right? Because in reality, we're only 1% form and we're 99% space. So how does that work? Right? And because
we were given 5 senses. So we figure if we can't use the 5 senses, it doesn't exist. And science has now proven that to be not true.
I would posit that those 5 senses just get finer and finer across those 9 dimensions.
Absolutely. That's exactly what happens. There's no demarcation point, right? There's no end that says, oh, now you're in the norm. Now you're not in the norm, right?
We're not in the bell curve.
It just pushes out, right? And everyone's different. What's normal for you might be a bigger expansion for someone else, might be smaller compared to somebody else again.
Sure. Absolutely. And I've experienced
I love that.
Oh, it's the diversity that makes life so rich.
And yet the most problems that we have with divorce and arguments between people and between countries is that you don't think like I think, so we're going to have to fight about it, right? And yet that's exactly what makes life interesting, is that we're not all the same.
Now, how do you deal with that?
That's a good one. How do you deal with that? Certainly not by giving everybody a little red button that, hey, if you don't do what I say, I'm going to push this button. Oh, well, I got one of those
buttons. Unless it's a pause button.
You push it, I'll push it, and then the whole world will be gone. Right? That's I don't know. I just see that as 2 little boys fighting. They're in the playground and they're fighting, right? I don't see that they grew up. Growing up is use your words, right? Let's communicate. The pen is mightier than the sword. Communicate.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and communicate doesn't mean I get my way and you don't. It means we compromise, we make it work.
Well, like I said before, the 5th, item in the 7 habits is to understand before being understood. And I've got another, dear friend, mentor. He's got a black belt in Aikido, and lawyer.
Wow.
He was president of the American Society for Alternate Dispute Resolution.
That's a mouthful.
And he's worked at the UN and different functions and team building kinds of things and conflict resolution. But he says, there really is no conflict. There's just miscommunication. People arrive at the table thinking differently, using two different dictionaries, not understanding the other. And so they're speaking and listening from their dictionary. But until they understand the other's dictionary, they're still going to have that miscommunication, and it's going to appear as conflict because they're going to get frustrated because they don't know what each other's trying to say.
I'm writing that down. I like that. That's a good concept. I like that concept.
It's imperative when you are in a process of working with people, project management, anytime, you get people working together in close proximity, they're going to have different ideas. They're going to speak differently. They're going to hear differently. And so you have to be really conscious of that, especially at my level now with this global organization and understanding, most people, English is a second language, right? So it's not only a dictionary, it's not even the same language, right? So I've got to be really hyper conscious of that and demonstrate how to do that for others. And that's kind of overwhelming at times because you have to be really quiet and allow. And what I find is that in that place, that silence is even more imperative, because then that opportunity to really empathize and intuit what the other is actually sensing and feeling and trying to say.
Well, that's very important. A lot of communication is intuiting. And I don't think we're doing enough of the positive. I think we jump to the conclusion of the negative, and that's what causes the dispute.
Or we don't, 85, or I think it's 85% of communication is body language, right? We don't necessarily observe that. We listen to the words and the tone. And that's how we distinguish whether we're in conflict or not. If it sounds like something we don't want to hear, then we want to argue with it.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely the truth. It's like when you go to a restaurant and the person taking your order is saying, okay, what would you like to have? And they're like this, and they never look at you. Or you get the waiter who stands there and he's paying attention to you and he's like, yes, sir, that's what you'd like to have, and answering questions. It comes with this. Would you like this and this with it? And he's looking right straight into your eyes. And then he looks at the other person and what would you like to have? And he remembers it. But nowadays, it's all about what's easiest, what's fast. Oh, we've got an iPad. Let's just plug your order right in here and I don't have to look at you.
Right.
It's impersonal. We're losing high touch. And with the internet, we're losing high touch. And we have to be very, very concerned that we bring high touch in with the high tech. And I've been saying that for 20 years, ever since computers came out. We need to bring that in. You've got to keep that. It's very important. And touch is one of our basic needs. Babies don't thrive unless they're touched.
It's absolutely true.
So we need that.
And how can we do that? Right?
Well,
there's multiple ways. I don't know that there's any pat answer right now, but there's just a consciousness of it. Having the conversations to include that in operational capacity.
There is a way that we can do it online, and it's not through actual touch, it's through appreciation. When you show your gratitude towards someone else, I make it a habit when somebody does something great, like it's good for me, they've gone out of their way, even if it's their job to do it, that they actually did it, right. I thank them. I'll tell them, you did a great job today. And that's like having a hug. It fills them up with warmth and feeling good about themselves.
Absolutely.
Self-worth. Building up self-worth, that's very important.
Well, and wouldn't you like to have that too? So why wouldn't you give that to another? If it means that much to you, why not share the same thing with someone else and you both get a warm fuzzy instead of a cold prickly?
I think we need to learn from our pets. because when you have a dog, he's always welcome. When you come home, he's always welcoming you. Oh, I've missed you all day. I thought you were dead. Like, where have you been? You disappeared at that door and you're just dead to me. Oh, you're back. You're back. I'm so happy to see you. Do we do that? Do we do that with our spouses? Do we do that with our good friends? Do we do that with our workmates? We need to do that all the time. When we get online and we're working with a group of people, we need to say, I'm so happy you're here with me. I'm so glad to be in your energy field. Mm-hmm. Instead of, yeah, I'm here. I showed up. What do you got for me? Right?
Right.
Instead of that, we need to show appreciation because you're giving of your time, regardless of what it is.
Absolutely. And as an example, I would even reference our conversation. It hasn't had the natural, unimpeded flow. There were some times where we had some challenges, and I didn't necessarily have a disagreement with you, but I clarified something that could have sounded a little terse or aggressive. And yet, because we have this relationship with each other prior to, that wasn't taken that way. It was just part of the conversation. We went right through it.
I adore you. You espouse everything that I've been standing for most of my life. You embody it with live and let live. So it's me, right? So we don't have to be exactly the same. I embrace the differences between us, and I want to learn more.
And even when the conversations may seem uncomfortable, it's simply because we haven't gotten the point of being of understanding the clarity that we need for that particular information or exchange. And that just happens, it's funny, and do you notice this, that questions are often taken as aggressive acts?
Yeah, and it's just like people on the road with road rage.
Right.
It doesn't need to be that way.
No, it doesn't, because the questions come from wanting to understand, usually. So why wouldn't you want to be understood? Instead of feeling, well, I don't wonder if like, oh, I've just been called out. I don't want that to happen. And so there's an aggressive stance because of that. Or maybe it's, I don't know the answer. I can't let you know I don't know the answer.
That would be embarrassing.
Right. I don't want to seem stupid. So I'm going to act out and I'm going to aggress on you so I can deflect that question and take you off on something else so that we don't have to talk about it.
Yeah.
Right. And these are just these are psychological patterns that when you study it, and you having a doctorate in psychology, I know you understand exactly what I'm saying, and those are coping strategies.
They are coping strategies. Yeah.
Ineffective ones at that. And yet we have that. So these are, things that I really, I know the audience is engaged by the conversation that we've had. Now, before we go, is there something that a tasty tidbit that you can offer as advice for the daily experience?
Tasty tidbit. Well, I don't know if this is exactly where you want it to go, but I'm from Canada, and in Canada, right? Yeah, out and about. When I'm out and about, this is probably not what you're looking for, but I'm going to say it anyways. With the past that we've just gone through, and earlier this year, we've had the truckers all head up to our capital in Ottawa to make a stand for freedom. Whether you believe in the mandates or you don't believe in the mandates, they took a stand. And I think that is a turning point in the world, because we got called out for being the first, and other countries have followed. I don't know if we were the first. I think Australia was doing quite a bit before we came along, but nevertheless, the truckers did make a stand, and then the American truckers started to make a stand. I think it's very important to know that we're not a stupid race of people, that we're a very intelligent race of people. We just want some really good leadership. And when we get great leadership, we're happy to be compliant and to work with everyone and to get along. And when
This all makes sense.
when we don't have that, we're going to act out a little bit in the ways that we know how, and in as less conflict of a type of way as possible. I don't know what the wording is there. I didn't speak very well, but in as little conflict as possible, we're going to make our voices heard. And because a few have made their voices heard, the rest of Canada there's been a change for all of us. And I think
trickle through.
If there's any tip that I can give to the world through your program today, it's that we need to make our own decisions and take a stand for what we believe in. Because if we're not taking a stand, we're going to get mulled over by tanks. We're not going to, we're going to
I've heard before, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything.
Everything. Yeah, exactly.
It's been such an enjoyable conversation, Lexis, and I really appreciate the time. And
I've enjoyed it myself.
Awesome. When we have fun, everybody else will too. Right?
I've had a blast.
Oh, me too. Me too. And I thank you again.
It's been my absolute pleasure. Wish I could continue.
Awesome. And we will, but just not now.
That would be great.
Great. Okay. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Namaste and in Lexiss. Thanks for sticking with us through this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and I will see you next time.